Down in rural Florida, tucked in between Gainesville and all of the swamps, there's this little town called Micanopy. It's known as one of those towns that time forgot. It has old oak trees dripping with Spanish moss, antique shops everywhere, dirt roads and forests that stretch out in every direction. Every guidebook and every local will tell you how charming this place is. They paint it as if it's a hidden, peaceful paradise. Quiet roads, easy trails, and friendly wildlife everywhere you look. It sounds too good to be true, because it is. It's not true. Nobody there warns you about the other side, the way the fog rolls in out of nowhere, the way the locals lie, and the hush-hush stories about the people that walked into the swamp and never came out. There's something seriously wrong about that place, and we didn't realize how dark it really was until we got there. If this is your first time on the channel, consider subscribing. If you're a regular viewer, double check that you're subscribed and please like the video before we start. And if you're watching on a podcast platform, consider giving us a 5-star rating, it helps a lot. And if you're watching on your TV, scan this QR code to enter our weekly giveaways. We go live every week and give away tons of merchandise. Enjoy. If you guys didn't know this, I played football my entire life. And usually when you play football growing up, you tend to go to football games. And when you're a young kid and you're watching professionals in college football, you come to realize that the SEC is the most entertaining conference in all of football. If that means nothing to you, I'm sorry, you miss out on the most competitive, passionate, and fun sporting events that go on in our country. I don't even care if you're from the South, choose an SEC team and become a fan, it is so fun. And that's not me promoting football or anything of that nature. It's the reason I went to Florida. So back when I was about 17 years old, one of my best friends named Joe had a bunch of family that lived in Florida, but they didn't live in Miami, they didn't live in Tampa, they didn't live in Orlando. They lived just south of Gainesville, right where the Florida Gators play. And every single year he would go visit his family and he would go to one of these Florida Gators games against one of their biggest rivals, and he loved it so much. And one year, he invited me. His sister had some type of cheerleading competition somewhere else, so they had extra space in the car and they had an extra ticket to the game. So naturally, he called me, he's like, dude, are you trying to go? I asked my parents, get a resounding yes. I'm in the car, we're driving from Illinois to Florida before you know it. And I don't know what I thought Florida was before I got there, but whatever you think Florida is, it's so much crazier than that. You think Miami, you think beaches, you think cruises, you think day parties at a tiki bar. You think Tampa, Florida, you think the Buccaneers. And when you think Orlando, you think Universal Studios. Nobody ever thinks about the middle of Florida. Gainesville is dead center. It is in the middle of the state. And we were staying in a town called Micanopy. So we're driving down there, we go through the Panhandle, which is very unique in itself. But then you get through Gainesville, and then you get to Micanopy. And you realize that you've never been anywhere like that before. Rural Florida is filled with the most interesting characters, some of the most interesting architecture, and the craziest landscape I've ever been around. They put their houses on stilts because they get hit with hurricanes, so they need to raise their homes like 15 feet off the floor. And the type of fun that they have in rural Florida is very different than most other people's kind of fun. We got there, very small town, very interesting. I get introduced to Joe's entire extended family, which is basically just his aunt, his uncle, and a couple of his cousins. But you realize immediately that there's almost no rules there. And the way that their kids grow up is very different from how we grew up. We had curfews, there was things you could and couldn't do in the neighborhood. You couldn't cause too much ruckus because the houses are very close together. Where we're from, you had to be much more tame. So when we arrived and we were introduced to rural Florida culture, it was absolute shock. But not shock in a bad way. We meet his Uncle Willie. He's super nice. They take us to get some barbecue, the food's amazing. And they introduced me to Joe's cousin, who I thought was Joe's uncle. I'm talking to this guy, I'm trying to be polite, I'm like calling him sir. And everybody starts laughing. This guy's got a mustache and long hair and he's wearing a trucker hat. Looks like he's worked in a mine for 15 years. This guy looks like he has 2 pensions. And he gives me a chuckle and he says, I'm 15. The kid was 2 years younger than me at the time. And he looks like a full-grown man. We have a good laugh about all that, we finish up our food, we head back to their house that's on stilts in the middle of a legitimate swamp and a forest. And this 35-year-old pretending to be a 15-year-old introduces us to his ragtag group of friends. And when I tell you not one of them looked under 25, I mean it. There's something in the air there. There's something about how these kids grow up that makes them full-grown men at 15 and 17 years old. But I'll piggyback onto that, and I'll tell you that nobody knows how to have fun more than rural Florida kids. There are no rules there. They'll buy legitimate cars for like $200-300, and they use them as real-life bumper cars. Their toys are ATVs and dirt bikes, and that's what they do all weekend. They all have fishing gear, they all have airboats. There's always something to do. And we were spending an entire week there. And by day 3, I was like, I could move here. Give me one of those trucker hats. If I flex hard enough, I could grow a mustache like you. I was ready to embrace the lifestyle. I never wanted to leave. The only thing about a place like that is to people like us that are from closer to an inner city is that it feels like you're unplugging. The small town life feels refreshing for a few days, but then the thought of living there kind of gets a little bit scary because every single person knows each other. And when something happens in a small town like that, it's major news, it's a major problem. When something bad would happen in Chicago, nobody talked about it within 24 hours because bad stuff happens every single day. And whoever the bad thing happened to, it was like a friend of a friend that you kind of knew, but you don't really care. But when something bad happens in a small town, every single person knows and every single person cares. And even though we were there for a few days and we were sharing amazing times with Joe's cousins and his friends, there were things that were going on in this town that they refused to tell us about because we weren't from there. It's not like they were hiding this crazy, insane secret, but it would be little things. Like we'd go to some burger joint and there would be a corkboard outside of it and there'd be like a missing person poster on it. They all would walk by the poster and they would like tap their chest and then tap the poster as if they were showing this person respect. And then when we would ask about who that person was, they wouldn't give us any details. And it was as if they were keeping a town secret. And at the time, we chalked it up to just showing respect to somebody else from their town that went missing, because they weren't giving us any indication that this was a close friend of theirs or one of their siblings. It was just a sign of respect. And then there would be little traditions that they would seem to do. Small things. When we would do a specific activity or we would go to a specific place, they would all do something together that was almost like some kind of ritual. And not actually a ritual, not like they were setting something up and doing a seance. If we would get onto an airboat and we would get onto one of these like swampy pond areas, they would all open a drink and they'd pour it into the water, all at the same time, as if this is what you do every time you get into this water. And they would look at us and they'd be like, you do it too. But then we would ask and they would give us no explanation. It's not like they were doing anything absurdly weird. There were no major red flags. Every friend group has the little things, the little inside jokes that they do, or things that are embedded in their culture that makes them who they are. And it became resoundingly clear that as wild and as reckless as these kids were, as feral as Florida teenagers are, they had immense respect for the marshes and the swamps and the ponds surrounding their area. They didn't mess around. Everything else, they were wild. They would literally drive cars into each other and laugh hysterically about it. But when it came to the water and it came to the swamp, there was almost a military level respect for it. So naturally, when Joe and I told Uncle Willie and his cousin that we were planning on going fishing by ourselves, they were filled with warnings. We basically asked, can we borrow a couple fishing rods, some bait, some hooks? We had never really fished before, but when we're in Florida, let's give it a try. Joe and I were absolute novices. Like, we don't know the first thing about fishing. But we were in Florida for a week. They have all the gear. Let's cosplay a little bit. Let's live this full experience. And of course, anybody that wants to come with can come with us. So it's a late afternoon, and they're basically trying to talk us out of going fishing. And Uncle Willie is saying to his son, like, can't you guys figure out something else to do? You guys are gonna lug all that fishing gear down the trail, and by that time it's gonna be dark. It's gonna be a whole mess. And his cousin is actively trying to listen to his dad, and he's like, guys, we could do something else. I'll call the boys. We figure something out. But Joe and I wanted to do what we wanted to do. We also wanted a little bit of alone time. As fun as it was, we also wanted some memories on this trip that were just us two. So we were okay with nobody else wanting to come. But Uncle Willie was making it a point that somebody had to come with us. And we knew that it was because of this immense respect for the nature here. And eventually, as we keep pushing, his cousin finally agrees to come with us. But he's like, I'm not staying there till it's dark out. We could go out for a few hours, but we're gonna come back before the sun goes down. And we're like, perfect, that's fine. So we pack together all of our things and we start heading over to the place that me and Joe wanted to go to. And there was this one really awesome trail called the Chicala Trail. And we were as excited about the trail as we were about the actual fishing spot. Because if you haven't been to that area in Florida, they have these trees that are like these gnarled, twisting branches covered in Spanish moss. It really gives that swamp feel, like the stuff that you see in cartoons. And it leads you to this fishing spot called Chicala Pond or Chicala Lake, I forget which one. And it was the absolute exact spot that we wanted to experience. And even though his cousin was trying to talk us out of it a little bit, trying to get us to go somewhere closer, we insisted that this is where we wanted to go. And again, he eventually caved and he's like, fine. But then you're probably only gonna have 2 hours to fish. And we're like, that's fine. We want the experience of this trail. So we take one of those like gator golf carts over to the edge of the trail. We hop out and we start walking. And it's everything that we imagined. This place is like a mystical swampland. This like neon green algae and moss whenever there's like big puddles off to our left and right. The Spanish moss hanging from above us, massive gnarled trees. It felt like there was alligators hiding in every single puddle. It felt like we were experiencing Florida. And this trail isn't extremely long. It was probably a 25-minute walk, literally not much. And we're walking, we're chatting. Everything is completely okay. The trail is completely empty, but then Joe's cousin started to act a little bit funny. He was acting worried. And like I said, this kid looked like he was 35, and he acts absolutely feral when you get him on an ATV, but he was acting skittish as we were walking down this trail. And we're checking in on him. We're like, hey, is everything okay? And he's like tipping his hat and he's looking around and he seems skeptical, as if he knows something, as if there's something that we were supposed to do or he forgot something and he doesn't want to tell us, as if we just wouldn't understand. But his energy feels off. And he starts saying things like, guys, I don't feel good. Can we head back? Like, I'll take you out here tomorrow. We're like, is your stomach rumbling? Because, we had barbecue, we had some baked beans. We're like, are you gurgling? What's going on? And he's avoiding the question. He's just like, guys, well, I'll just take you back tomorrow. Come on, let's just head back to the gator. Let's go back. And Joe and I are like, dude, it's okay if you don't want to be here. Like, if you don't feel all right, head back home. It's totally good. It's a 10-minute walk for us. We know we're not really going to catch any fish. Just let us have a little bit of fun. And as we're telling him, you could head back, it's totally okay, he stops in his tracks and he looks us both in the face and he says, we need to run right now. And he's being dead serious. And Joe and I look at each other and we look back at him and he says, you have 3 seconds. I'm going to start running. You need to run right now. We can't help but to chuckle, but your instincts make you look back at whatever he's talking about, as if there's some type of horrible wild animal behind us. We look over our shoulders down where we were going down the trail, and there's absolutely nothing there. There's just like a light fog rolling in. And not like a crazy fog, not like it's like some smoke bomb about to overtake the entire area. It looks like a little bit of fog in a place where it probably should be, a very swampy area. And we're not laughing at him, obviously we're taking his concerns seriously, but there's literally nothing there. So we look back at him and he says, I'm sorry, and he starts running. And I'm not talking joking running. He was running as if he was horrified and he didn't even look back. I'm talking full speed immediately, almost falling over himself running. And your initial instinct is to chase after him. When you see a crowd running, you're like, what are they running from? I'm not gonna risk it. If 10 people are running, I'm gonna run away too. And we're about to start chasing after him, and the fog just kind of starts rolling in behind us, like it passes our shoulders. And we look back, it feels a little bit eerie, but we know for sure there is nothing here. There's no predator, there's no person, it's literally just a light fog. So whatever phobia he's carrying about this isn't worth sprinting for your life. The fog's rolling in and he's turning the corner on the trail, and eventually we're pretty much in the fog. He's out of our line of sight and we're standing there in a very light fog looking at each other like, what is up with him? And we start laughing, saying that he really had to go, didn't he? Like as if it was a stomach issue. Because why else would he sprint away like that? He didn't say like something's behind you. He didn't warn us about anything. He was like, I'm not feeling good, and like touching his stomach and said, we need to go right now. We need to run immediately. And then said, I'm sorry, and sprinted off. I don't know about you, but I've been there and no explanation needed. Get yourself to a bathroom, brother. So we have a good laugh and we turn around and we start finishing this hike. We only have about 10 minutes left, like I said, and we start walking. The fog isn't like incredibly dense. We could see about 10-15 feet in front of us, and we could see into the distance a bit. It's just very foggy. If you've ever been to San Francisco, I'd compare it to that, when a nice fog rolls in, and it almost gives the area like a better ambiance. And we're walking for about 10 more minutes, and we're looking at the little map that we brought, and we're like, okay, we should be coming around a little edge right here. The pond/lake should be right about here. But then we're walking for like 15. And we're not coming across it, so we're like, did we take a wrong turn? But there is no wrong turn. There's only one trail, and we look down at our feet, and we're on it. And then we're walking for 20. And now we're in a very marshy area. Like, other than the trail, everything else was like watery, swamp, puddly. If we went off trail, we'd probably have water up to like mid-shin level. So we're like, okay, we must be getting closer to the lake, to the pond. And we walk for another 10 and we're looking at each other and we're like, hey man, like this is a little bit further than we thought. Walk for another 20. And we know for sure that we must have went the wrong direction because this wasn't that far of a hike. And for the first time in like 30-40 minutes from when his cousin ran away from us, we turn around and look back at where we came because we knew that there was only one trail in and it goes directly to this pond/lake. So why would we even turn around? And when we do, we realize that the marshy, swampy area on either side of our trail has slowly engulfed the trail behind us. It has completely overtaken where we were just walking. And if we were to walk back in that same direction, we wouldn't know where the trail was and we would be damn near knee deep in water. And this went all the way up to about 3 feet behind us. We didn't hear it, we didn't notice. We had no idea that the trail was disappearing as we were walking. And now we're 3 times further away than we intended to be. We thought it was a 25-minute hike. We've been hiking for what, 30, 45, maybe 50 minutes? And now we can't get back and the trail's gone. So me and Joe start game planning. And the only conclusion that we could come to is to continue hiking on this trail and hope that somebody else is fishing at the location. Because we aren't locals, we don't know another way back. And if we've been going for this long, there's no way we could be that far away. And in that exact moment, the only real option was to keep going. So that's what we did. But the further that we went, the denser the fog got. And I didn't want to tell Joe how worried I was. I didn't want to freak him out. The best thing to do in that situation is to keep the nerves down because we have to make decisions here. And I could tell he was doing the same for me. We both had full bellies, we were completely hydrated, and we knew we weren't that far away from their house. And we knew what general direction the house was. This trail wasn't super windy. If we turned around and we had to march through this swamp for about an hour and a half because we would have to walk half as fast, we could probably get back to the town. But that's worst case scenario. We don't want to have to march through this gross algae-filled, probably alligator-filled swamp. Best case scenario, we keep going on the trail, it loops around, we see a local, maybe somebody has an airboat, takes us back. There were better options here, and we weren't on a time crunch, so we kept going. The fog is getting a little bit denser, and eventually, we see somebody. We're like, oh, perfect, we could ask this person. And we think they're sitting on the trail and they're taking a break, and we're gonna be like, hey, don't mean to bother you, have a pretty positive interaction. But we're only able to see this person once we get within like 15 feet of them. And we start greeting this person. Hey, how you doing? We need some help from you. We think we're a little bit lost. The water's coming in on us. You probably don't want to sit there. But this person is sitting on their butt, holding their knees, and has their forehead on their knees, looking down into their lap. And we could tell that they're replying to us, but I can't really hear what they're saying. It sounds like gibberish, almost as if they're speaking a different language. And the accents down here can get very deep, but it didn't really sound like the accents that we were hearing all week. But then we get within 5 feet of this person, and I'm able to ask them, are you okay? And when they look up at me, I know for sure that they're not okay. Because what they said didn't match the way that they looked. They said very clearly, with not much of an accent, how long have you been out here? But when they looked up, their eyes were lightly clouded, like silvery gray and clouded, as if they were maybe blind. But they looked directly up at us, as if they were looking at us. And I guess they could hear where we were coming from, so they know how to look in the right direction. But his eyes looked blind. And we impulsively reply, I don't know, a little bit under an hour. How long have you been out here? And this person replies, I don't know, but at least you have a chance. And then they put their forehead back into their lap. And Joe and I are standing over this person, actually worried at this point, because we don't know if they're disabled, and we don't know what they're talking about. But there was something about his face, not just his eyes, that got me. He looked familiar to me. I was trying to think if we hung out with him this past week, because we had a couple group hangouts. I didn't know everybody super well, but I was trying to place where I knew his face from. But Joe started talking over my thoughts and started asking him more questions and encouraging him to get up and come with us. But their voice sounded absolutely defeated. They weren't entertaining what we were saying. They didn't seem like they wanted to move. And we walked around to the other side of him because we're gonna have to keep walking eventually here. And we're like, hey man, like, come on, get up. You're gonna be sitting in water in a second. It's flooding the trail, dude. You got like 2 minutes. Just come with us. And he peeked his cloudy eyes at us. And all he said is, no, it's not. Almost condescendingly, as if the trail wasn't flooding with water, and he didn't care, and he was going to continue sitting where he was sitting. And Joe started pulling my arm a little bit like, dude, let's go. He doesn't want our help. He's a stranger. And we start backpedaling away from him, and we're about 10 feet away. And I see him pick his head up one more time and say something to us. And mind you, this man was just speaking clear English. But the last sentence that he said was complete gibberish. It made no sense. It was like random sounds being thrown together. And then he put his head back in his lap. At that point, everything had changed for me. I didn't like how that person spoke to us. I didn't like the way I felt when I looked into their face. I didn't like that it reminded me of something. I didn't like that their eyes were cloudy. I didn't like that they were dismissive towards us, and I didn't like how defeated they sounded. I could tell Joe knew something was off about it too, but we couldn't go back and help them at that point. The second we turn around and walk in that direction, we are committing to having wet feet. We weren't prepared to walk through swamp. We were prepared to fish off the edge of a lake. And at that point, dry feet was more important to us. We didn't know how long we would be out there. We didn't know how long it would take to get back. And we still felt like the best case scenario was to find somebody that could help us get back on a dry trail, or at least an airboat. And the water didn't stop. As we kept walking, after 5 or 10 minutes, and we turned around and looked back at where we came, the trail was completely covered with water and swamp. The water was encroaching on us and we had to keep moving, and the person that was sitting on the trail was definitely now sitting in swamp water. But it felt like something about the trail had changed. It felt like we were deeper into whatever forest preserve, swamp preserve this thing was. It didn't feel like we were close to civilization. It felt like we were far out. But the worst part about it was that we started to hear more things. We started to hear more wildlife, but we also started to hear what sounded like people shouting in the distance. We couldn't hear what they were saying, it just sounded like people yelling out. And at a certain point, we started yelling back, because we don't know if it's our friends and family looking for us. Maybe there's a flash flood going on and this is a bad situation, and we're just casually walking and letting this water encroach on us, but putting ourselves further and further into a very dangerous spot. So maybe people are looking for us. But as these shouts kept happening, it didn't seem like it was people calling our names. It just sounded like people in the distance. And a few of them sounded like that gibberish. So then I started thinking, is that person that we saw on the trail just screaming in gibberish? And I'm just hearing echoes of them. But then we started seeing people out in the distance, in the swamp. We couldn't see any details about who they were, but every time we would see somebody, we would get kind of excited because we're like, okay, at least there's people here. Eventually we're gonna run into somebody. They're too far away to hear us and the fog is still very thick. They might not be able to see us, we could only see their silhouette, but at least they're around. The only issue was that we had to keep walking because the water was encroaching on the trail, so we have to go further. But there's a little bit of optimism. We see silhouettes in the distance and we're waiting for an interaction. We're trying to stay calm. We are in the middle of nowhere. These trees with the Spanish moss is towering over us. The visibility is very low, but then we hear something to our left. And about 30 to 50 yards into this swampy marsh, we see a group of guys. We're like, oh, perfect. There's multiple people. But before we start calling over to them, we realize that they're moving a little bit funny. And I'm not saying they were moving like zombies or looking weird in any way. They were moving in unison. They were moving as if they were a military unit marching together. Like they had to stay in formation. And the fog is still pretty thick and they're not close enough for us to get a really good look at them. But they seem to be in uniform and they seem to have rifles. So then I think, is it a group of hunters? Are they out here shooting alligators? Who knows? Who knows what they do out here? And we can't stop and get closer to them. We have to continue walking. And they're walking in the other direction. So we're technically passing each other. We can't stop moving and they're marching. They look like they have orders, but they're wearing funny pants and funny shirts. And I'm squinting my eyes and I'm trying to understand what I'm looking at. And then Joe finishes my thought. I'm so close to calling out to these guys for help. But then Joe goes, are those dudes cosplaying? And that's when I realized that's the weird thing that I was noticing. They were dressed up like old-timey soldiers. Like I'm talking Revolutionary War. Civil War, maybe. So then I asked Joe, do they do reenactments here? Is this some type of LARPing that's going on? And Joe's shaking his head. He's like, I never heard anything like that. But again, we only have a couple moments to decide if we're gonna call out to these dudes. The water's encroaching on us and they're marching in the opposite direction. And they look like they're very focused on doing something. and they look weird enough that Joe and I make a silent decision to not call over to them. We didn't like the situation, and we saw other people in the distance, so subconsciously, we both decided, let's not call out to them, and we kept moving. We were optimistic there was going to be another opportunity based on the sounds that we were hearing. So we kept going, and the water behind us was kind of picking up speed. It wasn't letting us do a slow stroll. We had to keep a pretty good pace, pretty quick walk. And I really didn't like that because if we saw somebody, I would like to stop. But a couple more minutes pass, and then we hear something. And I don't recognize the sound right away, but Joe does. He goes, dude, that's an airboat. I think we got something. And we're looking off to our right, and we see somebody on an airboat on the swampy, marshy area, again about 30 to 50 feet away, about the same distance as that group of guys. And it's one man, and he's slowly driving his airboat, and we could see that he's looking around in all directions. And his initial body language, I feel like he looks lost. Just the way his head is moving around and the way that he's maneuvering the boat. But I don't know anything about airboats. Maybe he's maneuvering around the shallow parts. Who knows? But then I see him tilt his head up and he starts shouting. And he's shouting a full sentence. And I'm like, oh great, maybe he's in a similar situation as we're in. I still can't get a good look at him, but he's yelling gibberish. His sentence doesn't make sense. We wouldn't be able to hear him like so clearly, but I could tell. It was that same tone as I heard back there. So we decide to pick up the pace of our walk because there's some trees obstructing our view of him. And we start up a nice little jog. We get past this very dense area of trees and we get a little bit ahead of the water so we could stop, wave our hands and shout to him. And we're squinting through the fog looking at him, but he has the back of his head towards us. So when we shout, you kind of see him perk up like he heard us and he whips his head around. And this man is horrifying. This dude's teeth were all jacked up, his skin was patchy and damn near falling off of his face. He looked like a wreck. He looked like somebody pulled his skin down and was exposing the bottom of his eyes. And his eyes were that same cloudy white, the same as the kid that we saw on the trail. But this is the part that really freaked me out. When he turned around and revealed his horrifying face, looking at us, he looked scared. He was the scariest person I had ever seen. He looked like a swamp nightmare. He looked like the swamp chewed him up and spit him out, and he was looking at us as if he was scared of us. His body language got horribly frantic. He immediately turned the engine up on his airboat, steered it around, and got as far away from us as he could, as quickly as he could. And the only thing that I could ask Joe was, did you see his face? And the only thing Joe could ask me was, why was he scared of us? But we couldn't sit around and chat because the water was encroaching on our heels and we had to keep walking. This is when we started to worry a little bit about fatigue because we'd been going for quite a while and we had to pick up the pace. And as these odd things are occurring and you're getting these adrenaline dumps, you start to get emotionally and physically fatigued. And you know that the water's not stopping. So it feels like there's despair encroaching on you in every second. And you're just trying to keep one foot after the other as you're trying to comprehend what had just happened to you. And we're going for another 5-10 minutes, not really having any words for each other until we hear another sound coming from a little bit further on the trail. But this wasn't gibberish. This wasn't shouting. This wasn't a group of military men giving each other orders. It wasn't an airboat. When I initially heard it and when I recognized what it was, I got excited because it was music. I heard music coming from down the trail and we're like, okay, if somebody's playing music, they're not worried. And we start picking up the speed a little bit because we don't want the water right at our heels in case they're in an airboat off the trail. We want to talk to them. We want to have a second. We want to stay dry if this is the rescue part. So we hustle up and we start closing in on the music. And then I could see where it's coming from through the fog a little bit. And I see a boombox on the ground on the trail. And I'm expecting to see somebody behind it, somebody playing the boombox. But as we get closer to it, we're very let down very quickly. All there is a couple random belongings, a little holder that has various CDs in it, and a big boombox playing music. And it was playing Nelly. It was playing like a 2004 summer hits track. And it was this bright red boombox. It had some headphones next to it, it had a hoodie next to it, and it had what looked to be a yearbook next to it. So we're listening to this music, we're looking around for the owner of these belongings. We pick up the yearbook, and there's a CD sticking out of the top of it, as if it was a bookmark. And we open it up to that page, and it's 2 pages of random students, but one of the students is circled. And there's a big arrow towards the circled student and a note at the bottom, and it says, "That's me." Today is June 18th, 2004. If you find this, I went off trail to find help. I've been walking for days. I don't know where I am. I need you to understand that reading that note in that yearbook hit us as heavily as it hit you. But when swamp water is closing in on you and it's not stopping, you don't have time to sit and think about it. The boombox has no worth, neither do the headphones, neither does the hoodie, neither does the yearbook. When water is closing in, it's time to go. And right as we were finishing the last line of that very confusing, ominous note, the water was engulfing the boombox and we had to start moving again. And yes, we're talking. Yes, we're trying to discuss what that thing said. And we're coming to terms that we seem to be in the same situation that kid was. He said, I've been walking for days. But then I start thinking about the first kid that we saw on this trail. He stopped walking. He was just waiting there. It didn't make sense. And at that very same moment, I see Joe. He's doing like a little prayer. He's touching his head, the middle of his chest, left pec, right pec. I see he's throwing up a prayer. He's really worried. But at the end of his prayer to himself, he pats his chest twice and like points at the sky. And then I realize where I know that kid from. That was the kid on the missing poster outside of the burger joint that all of Joe's cousins were tapping their chest and then tapping his face on the wall as a tribute to him. That's where I knew his face. And on that poster, he had been missing for weeks. And right when Joe finished his prayer, he asked me a question that for some reason was at the back of my mind. He said, why would my cousin leave us like this? If he knew what this was, if he knew how dangerous this was, why would he leave right away? Why would he just abandon us? And I'm not gonna pretend that didn't make me angry. He was right, I didn't think about it. He barely tried to convince us. He said, run now, then I'm sorry, and left. He didn't say the swamp was going to start closing in on us. He made it seem like he had a tummy ache and he had to go relieve himself really quick and abandoned us here where his missing friend was. Now we're stuck on this winding trail that the kid with the boombox was stuck on for days, and we are going to be forced to continue to walk, or we're going to be forced to give up and sit in the swamp like his friend did. And all of these thoughts are going through our heads as we are walking at a very high pace. And we start discussing, when are we going to start dropping these backpacks? When are we going to drop this gear? He left us out here. Who cares if we lose a couple fishing rods? We are getting tired. The pace that we have to keep up is becoming very fatiguing. But it doesn't matter how much fatigue you're feeling when you get another adrenaline spike. We heard a sound that we had not heard quite yet, and I don't know how to explain it other than an Aztec death whistle that had a siren effect to it. You know how when an ambulance is going by you, it sounds like the sound is going in a circle, so you hear it really loudly and then really faintly, even though the ambulance is right next to you? It sounded like that, and we can't stop walking. But we look to our right and we see something that I can only explain as an extension of the swamp. It literally looks like swamp water and Spanish moss and algae had taken shape into some lumpy cloak-like figure, and an extremity was coming off of this thing and swinging a rope in a circle that had some type of device at the end of it that was creating this death whistle sound, and it was swinging it like a lasso in a large circle, creating the siren-like effect. This thing looked like a swamp grim reaper, slowly marauding towards us, looking as if it is one with the swamp, and it's warning us that it's coming. And that's when we decided to drop the backpacks. That's when the fishing rods didn't matter. That's when the gear didn't matter anymore. Simultaneously, we threw these things off our back and we got moving. But it's very discouraging when you start picking up the pace and the water does it with you. As I'm looking over my shoulder to try to keep track of whatever that thing is, I realize that the faster we go, the faster the water goes. And whatever that thing was, it was coming from our right side, but it flanked behind us and was now just out of sight where the trail used to be. And no matter how hard we sprinted, I could see its silhouette right behind us, as if it was encroaching on us like the water was. And I could see its whistle reaching out of the fog, as if no matter how hard we sprinted, it was right at the edge of it. And we're starting to run out of gas. We can't run forever, and we have to start looking at other options. There were airboats randomly abandoned throughout the entire time that we were walking. which isn't super uncommon, but the amount that we saw became suspicious, but it was the least of our worries based on the other things that we were noticing. None of them looked very operational. The only one that we saw operating was the one with the man on it. But to our left, we saw one that looked pretty good. It looked in pretty good shape, and we knew that we couldn't run forever. And whatever was behind us wasn't fleeing from us. It didn't look at us and get scared. This thing saw us and had been following us since it saw us. And even though the trail felt like the safest option, even though getting into the swamp, deciding to get your feet wet puts you into a completely different level of danger, when your heart's pumping and your muscles are filling with lactic acid, an airboat sounds pretty good because you can escape without your lungs collapsing. And I know that Joe sees it too. We can't talk that much, but we're speaking with our eyes and we're pointing. Are we about to go off trail? And I get the confirmation nod. Yes, we are. But we decide to pick up the pace a little bit to try to get a little bit further ahead of this thing so we could at least roll our pants up to our knees before we enter the water. It's not like we had waterproof pants. It wasn't going to help us. Having heavy, waterlogged pants would have been worse. If just our shoes are wet, we're better off. So we stop for just a moment. I rip one of my pant legs up, I rip the other one up, and I'm ready to get into the water. But Joe is closer to that side where the airboat is. He's about to take his step, and I see that rope wrap around his leg, his base leg that's still on the trail. And whatever freaky death whistle was at the end of that rope was like a nice anchor for it to wrap around a few times, and when whatever that thing was tugged it, it wrapped it tight, and it yanked Joe's leg out from under him, and now he was on his stomach, on the ground, with his leg bound, dragged into the fog. And as Joe is being dragged into the fog towards this figure that's just beyond eyesight, but you could see its silhouette, he's pleading for help. He's yelling things like, grab my arm, pull me back, but I have no opportunity to do that, and he gets dragged further. And then his screams for help turn to gibberish. He's deep into the fog, and he's not making any sense. He says 2 more sentences that sound like a completely different language. It makes no sense at all. And then he starts screaming, God. Over and over, he's screaming and shouting, God. But the tone of it was very odd. His pleading screams were filled with fear, but then he was screaming God as if he was almost celebrating, but I couldn't see him anymore. So it was horrifying. It was as if whatever that thing was could take his voice, and it's just screaming God. And I'm sprinting as fast as I can away from this thing. Airboat is off the table. I'm alone. I don't know how to turn one on. I don't know how to drive one. The only thing that I trust is my feet in that moment. And I'm giving every ounce of myself to get away from this thing as my best friend is screaming God. And I'm waiting for any second for that rope to whip around my legs, but then it hits me. It all hits me at once, and I stop, and I turn around towards my friend that's shouting God in the shadows of the fog, and I wait for the water to encroach, and I wait for whatever this thing is to catch up to me. And the swamp water gets all the way up to my feet, and then it stops. The second it touches my feet, it stops. And then into the fog, I don't see Joe at all anymore. All I see is this mossy cloak, and it's not swinging the rope anymore, and it's just sitting there, one with the swamp, motionless. And I hear a little bit of gibberish and God again, and I take my first step into the swamp water, and I start walking towards this thing, and I get all the way up to it. It's completely black, covered in Spanish moss. I can't see where it starts and where it ends, but I know exactly what to do. And I fall to my hands and my knees. I get all the way to my belly, and my face and my head is under this swamp water that's only about 1.5 feet. And I army crawl forward, and then I stand up once I'm inside of it. And I'm looking at Joe, and I'm looking at Uncle Willie. And I turn around, and I get a really good grasp of what this thing is. We are under some type of tarp or some type of cloak that's covered in Spanish moss, but you're able to see out of it when you're inside of it, but you can't see into it when you're outside of it. And I look back to where I came from, and there's no trail. It's as if the swamp overtook the endless trail that we were walking, and we were in the middle of some swampy marsh, and Uncle Willie starts guiding us back home. And I'm not gonna pretend like under that cloak, the air was fresh and nice. It smelled like swamp and breath and Uncle Willie's armpits. And as much as we wanted answers in that moment, Uncle Willie wasn't willing to give them to us. One thing I did notice was that he had all of the fishing gear, as if he picked it up after we dropped it. And he was joking with us saying, "This is why I didn't want to let you guys borrow it." And we're walking through this swampy marsh like we're Harry, Hermione, and Ron with the invisibility cloak over us, exploring Hogwarts in the middle of the night. And we're going for about 30-45 minutes. And our feet are getting wet, I can feel my toes getting pruny, and eventually, finally, we get to dry land. And we're right on the edge of town. And we're able to peel this mossy cloak off of us. And I see Uncle Willie folding it up like this isn't going to be the last time that he uses it. And Joe's cousin comes pulling up to pick us up in that Gator golf cart, and he's so happy to see us. He's apologizing profusely, so I didn't have time to explain I couldn't wait. If we all got caught in it, we were screwed. I got Uncle Willie, he's the only one that knows how to deal with that. And I'm looking at the cloak that he used, this mossy cloak, like it was covered in real moss from the trees. And I couldn't help but to think, it looked old. It looked as if they'd been using that for a very long time. And I didn't know how much explanation we were going to get, but he gave us this. He said the fog collects people. He said it's always moving, and once you're inside of it, it distorts just about everything. It distorts voices, it distorts appearances, and it seems to distort time. In my head, I came to that conclusion, not everything that he said, but the reason I stopped and I waited for it is because I realized that people weren't speaking gibberish. It seemed as if they were speaking backwards. I only noticed because Joe was screaming, "Run, help, grab my arm." I left out the fact that he was saying my name with almost every sentence. "Doug, grab my arm. Doug, run." And then once he was deep into the fog, he was shouting God, but he was saying it a little bit weird. And it was because it was Doug backwards. He was saying my name, and then the fog distorted it, and it came through backwards. And then I thought about all of the other gibberish that I was hearing, and it seemed like coherent sentences played back to you on a CD, backwards. I'd heard it before. I'd heard that type of distortion of a voice before. But then Uncle Willie kept going, and he explained that that cloak has been handed down through generations, and it's covered in the moss that you find in the trees here. And it's the only thing that we have that stops the distortion. He's able to see through it clearly. He's able to actually see where people are. He's able to hear everything clearly, and he doesn't lose any time. But he said that the first day that you're out there is when it's the easiest to find you. Because if the fog moves and the fog leaves the area, you leave with it. Whatever direction you're going into the fog, you're going further away. But if the fog goes further away, there's no telling how far you actually went. And we asked him a few things about some of the stuff that we saw. We mentioned that we saw the kid from the missing poster, and he asked us what color his eyes were. And we said that they were white. He looked like he was blind. And I could tell on Uncle Willie's face that he didn't want to tell us what that actually meant, but his reaction was enough. That meant he was gone. And then we told him about the man in the airboat, the horrifying man that looked scared of us. And we asked him, why would a man that looks like that with an airboat be scared of two teenagers with fishing gear shouting for help? And he said, whatever he looked like to you, the fog made you look like that to him. Whatever you saw, he saw. It stops people from helping each other. And then we asked him about the group of military men that we saw, and we told him about the boombox in the yearbook from 2004. How could the boombox still be playing? The kid went off trail in 2004. And Uncle Willie said, time works differently in there. I don't think those soldiers were reenacting anything. And as we're coming to conclusions about everything that we witnessed, and we're headed back to the house, and we're safe now and everything's good, we had one more question. What was with that death whistle you were swinging around? And that made Uncle Willie laugh. He liked that one. And he said that wasn't to scare you guys. That thing keeps the gators away. They're much bigger in the fog. Like and subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed that story. I know it's a few days late. It was my birthday weekend on September 12th. I had a little bit of fun. It would mean a lot to me if you got this video to 30,000 likes in the first week as a birthday gift for me dropping videos every single week for you guys. That would be the best birthday gift ever. Also, if this is your first time viewing, subscribing to the channel would also be a great birthday gift. A 5-star rating if you're listening on a podcast platform, also a great gift idea. And I have some gifts for you guys, so please scan this QR code and join the weekly merch giveaway raffle. Everybody's eligible. Just scan the QR code, follow the instructions, and you don't even have to come to the live. You might just get an email that you want free merch. I deeply appreciate all of your guys' support. The channel's been growing, everything's been fantastic. It's been a crazy week. I hope I was able to give you guys some entertainment to ease your minds. We really appreciate you guys, and we really appreciate this community. And we can't wait to get to 1 million subscribers. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so now. If you haven't liked the video already, please do so now. And if you like this video, YouTube thinks that you would really like this one.